Greetings, fair listeners, and thank you for joining me once again as we celebrate stories and storytelling in all their forms, and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I am the Tale Collector, and your host, Erica Lynn Adams. As a kid fresh into teenhood, I originally got hooked on this short-lived Disney Channel series for the same reasons anyone at that age would. The creepy creatures and the spooky strangeness. But as I got older and was finally able to refresh myself on it again via Disney+, I realized there was another reason it appealed to me so. It provided me with my first real glimpse at the possibilities and benefits of running one's own website. More than just a digital work of art the owner can continually personalize to their heart's content, it provides the ability to reach out to those who share their passions no matter the distance between them. Of course, this is common knowledge now, but to me back then, it was the epitome of technological genius and unbridled imagination, and the awesome young protagonist couldn't have provided a better introduction. Prepare yourselves. Things are about to get so weird. Airing on the Disney Channel from 1999 to 2001 and recommended for viewers 13 and up. Fiona Phillips, or Fee for short, isn't your typical teenager. She lives on a tour bus, traveling cross-country with her mother, Molly Phillips, a famous rock star, and the rest of their family and crew. But that's not the only thing unusual about Fee's life. She harbors an unshakable belief in the supernatural, enigmatic, and unexplained in all its forms. And despite what her skeptical family thinks, her bizarre phenomena are neither fantasy nor science fiction. They are very real and dangerous. On her website, the aptly named So Weird, Fee shares her experiences and conducts research with her followers to solve the many mysteries which threaten her loved ones or seek out her help in setting old wrongs right. And along the way, she hopes to solve the most important mystery of all, the one behind her father's death. So Weird was to the X-Files what Gargoyles was to Batman the Animated Series. Even without the adult language and violence, this otherwise similar high-tech truth-seeking series was the darkest show the Disney Channel produced at the time, and possibly ever. One of its greatest strengths is its diverse subject matter in the science fiction, horror, and fantasy genres, with Fee and her family encountering everything from ghosts, aliens, and monsters to time travel, parallel universes, and government conspiracies. I think part of this can be attributed to the eclectic experience of series creator Tom J. Astle, who's written for numerous films and TV shows for all ages before and after this one, like Twilight Zone 88, Stargate SG-1, Elmopalooza, Failure to Launch, and Home, to name just a few. Another major part, as mentioned, is its timely portrayal of the internet. Fee's website is often used to get her out of a wide range of paranormal predicaments. When not performing its ordinary intended function of providing her with the info she needs in a pinch, it can sometimes perform extraordinary functions as well, like telling the future through videos and online articles, to allowing real-time chats with a coma patient. Plus, there are few things more nostalgic to this adult millennial than the sweet sounds of a modem dialing up. That said, it's also unfortunately the biggest indicator of the show's datedness. Considering how no current internet user in their right mind would open emails from unknown senders or visit suspicious websites, I can't deny that watching the characters do exactly that at least once is cringeworthy to say the least. Almost every episode begins with Fee giving a quick monologue, accompanied by a montage of text, images, and footage, some courtesy of sources like ISMI Masterclips, ClickArt, and Master Gallery, that does more than introduce the spectacle of the week. In under a minute, Fee's delivery speaks volumes about her character. Smart, enthusiastic, and open-minded through her fun facts, but also bold, witty, and relatable through her side quips and associated memories. Yet we also see sensitivity and introspection through her attention to the real-world implications of such otherworldly things, especially in relation to her late father, Rick, suggesting that her interests are much more than a hobby, that just maybe, given the chance, she might use such close encounters to bring him back to her reality. While several of the entities Fee meets are indeed malevolent, others have human emotions and flaws to the point where they consider their power a curse. The ease with which they bare their souls to Fee upon her discovering their secrets can feel contrived at times, but their stories are poignant nonetheless. Among many others, a young immortal who could never make friends for the simple reason that she will outlive them by centuries. A performing siren whose enchanting voice leaves her trapped by an exploitative manager and unable to find true love. a teen science prodigy who feels existentially lost upon learning he's a clone, and a werewolf child who fears losing the love of her human parents should they learn of her beastly heritage. I also find the group's varied reactions to Fee's claims and their own close encounters very refreshing. While I would argue that Fee could be compared to characters like Courage the Cowardly Dog or Sylvester in the Looney Tunes short Scaredy Cat, and that she's usually the only one aware of any supernatural danger and must therefore rescue her loved one single-handed, thankfully said loved ones aren't like Eustace and Muriel or Porky Pig, oblivious or disbelieving to the point of becoming idiots and/or jerks. Though no-nonsense band manager Irene has little patience with mysteries, and gentle giant tutor and bus driver Ned sees them only through a cultural or historical lens, the couple has the Phillipses' best interests at heart. Irene sharing a sisterly bond with Molly and a sincere interest in cultivating her career, and Ned showing the same care and affection to Fee and Jack as their own sons. Clue, with his surfer dude persona, and Carrie, with his love of the music scene, each epitomize their own brand of cool, with varying degrees of success. They may not share Fee's brains or her beliefs per se, but they do share her sense of adventure and imagination, and will often go along with her plans for fun as well as backup. But it's Fee's mother and brother who act as her foils and really put the concept of faith in perspective. In typical older sibling fashion, Jack loves to tease Fee for her so-called ridiculous stories, and easily gets frustrated by what he sees as her making herself a public nuisance. Yet as much as he hesitates to believe in miracles and offer false hope, he knows deep down that Fee means well and really does want her to succeed in helping others, whether the methods are normal or not. And when he does find himself face to face with something he can't explain away, he proves time and again that his love and loyalty are stronger than his cynicism and doubt. Molly's fears run deeper than just the ordinary hardships of single parenthood, long travel, and tight schedules. As her late husband was also her professional partner, her artistic passion is a double-edged sword. His spiritual presence that she wants to believe she feels beside her on stage equally comforting and painful. This, along with trying to understand and support her headstrong daughter while trying to keep her safe, not only makes her empathetic as a mother and human being, but also genuine as a singer and performer. The music tour angle isn't just a convenient plot device to get a new location for each episode. Molly's songs often play pivotal roles in both plot and character development. It's unfortunate that some are either incomplete or have dialogue and sound effects on them, as the soundtrack, like the show, never got an official release. Still, whether ballad or blues or acoustic or Celtic, as I listened again after over 20 years, I lost count of how many times I found myself bobbing my head or being moved literally to tears. When lead actress Cara DeLizia wanted to leave the show, Fee was replaced by Alex Johnson as family friend and new protagonist Annie Thalen. Whereas Fee's 2 seasons comprise a detective story packed with high stakes and a dark history, Annie's more colorful and light-hearted third and last season is a journey of self-discovery spurred by her own budding musical talent and a mysterious connection with a benevolent phantom Black Panther. Not bad, just different, like this entire show. So Weird represents one of the rare times pre-21st century that the Disney Channel would push the envelope with its youth-oriented content to create a mature, nuanced drama as well as an awesomely chilling urban fantasy. But more than that, it showed me that when it comes to truth being out there, the sky really is the limit, both scientifically and spiritually. Gather round next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you. Greetings, listeners, and thank you for joining me once again as we celebrate stories and storytelling in all their forms and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I am the Tale Collector and your host, Erica Lynn Adams. When I heard that Daft Punk was retiring in 2021, my heart ached a little, as I harbor very fond memories of my phase with the French electronic duo. I remember when I first heard their famous hit, One More Time, on the radio. Admittedly, though I liked it, my mind wasn't exactly blown, not at first. But then came the night of my 9th grade homecoming dance, my favorite of the 4 I attended because I heard more than just rap the entire night. Also, unlike the dances of my sophomore, junior, and senior years, at this one they set up a screen on the gymnasium wall on which music videos of the songs played were projected. One of these was the aforementioned Daft Punk song, whose video I now saw with surprised delight was an anime. Even better, as Toonami's Midnight Run Special Edition later confirmed, it was no standalone short. Now my mind was blown. Presenting Interstella 4-5, the story of the secret star system, released in 2003 and recommended for viewers 13 and up. On a distant planet in another galaxy, a race of peaceful blue-skinned humanoids enjoys a concert performed by their local pop group, comprised of Octave, the smooth-singing lead vocalist and keyboardist, Stella, the kind and lovely female bassist, strong-willed guitarist Arpeggius, and comical short-statured drummer Beryl. The tower guards also listen in with great pleasure from their post, not realizing until it's much too late that their planet is being invaded. The crowd is knocked out and the quartet kidnapped, but not before a desperate SOS is sent out to Shep, a brave space pilot out on patrol. Determined to rescue the band, particularly Stella, he follows the invading ship through a wormhole all the way to planet Earth. There, the helpless four are transformed physically and mentally into humans by the evil Earl de Darkwood, who forces them to perform as the hottest new music sensation, the Crescendos, for his own nefarious purposes. With Shep's help, Octave, Stella, Arpeggius, and Beryl must find a way to restore their memories and their forms in order to stop Darkwood from using them and their music to realize his insane dream of universal conquest. In the process of recording their second studio album, 2001's Discovery, and considering ideas for the track's music videos, Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Cristo, known collectively as Daft Punk, decided they wanted to create an accompanying film which would blend sci-fi with entertainment industry culture. Eventually settling on the format of animation, the duo recalled their childhood love of anime, especially that of legendary Japanese manga artist Leiji Matsumoto, one of their favorites being his acclaimed 1978 space opera series, Space Pirate Captain Harlock. Through a connection with music company Toshiba EMI, now EMI Music Japan Inc., Daft Punk was introduced to Toei Animation in Tokyo, where they at last got to meet their hero in person in hopes of a collaboration. Matsumoto, for his part, was touched by the duo's praise of his work, not to mention fascinated by the robot disguises they were known to don in public. He himself had been greatly inspired by French films and had a wish of his own to create a piece of animation set to his other great love, music, living by the belief that, quote, musicians are magicians. Needless to say, he was more than happy to join the animation team as visual supervisor. The result was Interstella 4-5. That's 4-5 as opposed to 5-5-5-5 or quadruple 5, likely as an homage to another famous work of Matsumoto's, Galaxy Express 3-9, pronounced 3-9 as opposed to 999 or 999. Funny side note, I see this movie as a sort of a reversal of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. The blue music-loving creatures of this Pepperland-like paradise equally praised their futuristic equivalent to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, while the human Darkwood and his followers make the music-hating Chief Blue Meanie and his minions look like Gru and his minions. Somehow, I think I'd rather endure Chief's bleak utter silence than Darkwood's warping of music for evil. The film is presented much like Walt Disney's Fantasia, a compilation of short films whose events are portrayed through music and visuals alone. But instead of a batch of unrelated pieces with wildly differing plots and tones all strung together, here we have the official music videos of all 14 of Discovery's tracks in chronological order, each one a separate episode which makes up part of a sort of hour-long miniseries. Though there is no dialogue, sometimes a character will be seen singing via the tracks, like when Octave is vocalizing the lyrics performed by American DJ and singer Romanthony while the band is playing One More Time, or when Shep is jamming to Daft Punk's own vocals of Digital Love while cleaning his ship and fantasizing about Stella in outer space. While this is an innovative format for a feature film, I imagine that anyone watching the individual videos for the first time and out of order may feel confusion due to a lack of context, like starting an unfamiliar movie or show at the halfway point. The only video I think feels the most complete on its own story-wise is Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, during which we see the unconscious band's transformation process inside Darkwood's underground science facility. There is a minimal, but frankly distracting use of sound effects. This isn't quite so bad when it's done during silent intervals between songs, like the evening rainfall preceding night vision, but rather than enhancing a tone of some scenes as clearly intended, I find them jarring and annoying when right in the middle of a track I'm trying to listen to, like the car crash toward the end of Superheroes or the thunderstorm in Verdus Quo. Mussorgsky got Chernobog's point across quite clearly without sound effects, thank you very much. Speaking of distraction, I wasn't very familiar with Matsumoto's work when I first saw this movie, but having since watched Harlock and Galaxy Express, along with early aughts miniseries like Cosmo Warrior Zero and Gun Frontier, his distinctive character designs, from his tall, slender ladies to his wide-mouthed, beady-eyed boys, make it near impossible for me now not to think of some of his most iconic characters here, Stella and Beryl, for instance, being dead ringers for Maytel and Tochiro, respectively. In a much more subtle example of intriguing character design, I believe the 4 humanized bandmates each represent a specific music genre. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert on the subject, so please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea came to me after putting together the earthly attire and the fake member bios shown on TV for the human fans. Stella represents country, being from Memphis and dressed in a slim tasseled jacket, miniskirt, and cowgirl boots. Arpeggius represents rock, being from London and sporting a torn-sleeve shirt, studded wristbands, skinny black jeans, and sneakers. Beryl was harder for me to determine, and this might be a bit of a stretch, but I'd guess that he represents metal, being from Munich and wearing ragged clothes, a neck towel, fingerless gloves, and combat boots. And Octave represents funk, being from Brooklyn and looking sharp in a Motown-era frilled shirt, jacket, and bell-bottoms straight from the Jackson 5. Along with a mutual love and clear respect of science fiction on their parts, I think what makes this collaboration work is that Daft Punk's initial concept of overcoming oppression and rebelling against an overly mechanized existence is one that Matsumoto often featured in his own stories. This idea is portrayed surprisingly well in the literal down-to-earth setting of the rich and glamorous but brutal profit-driven music industry. One More Time establishes the happiness the bandmates feel as they play for themselves and their people, via the song's optimistic lyrics and jubilant tune, and the bliss plain on their faces. Compare that to Crescendos. The band, now humanized and brainwashed by Darkwood, is dragged from gig to gig, their expressions blank and lifeless despite their skyrocketing worldwide fame, all to the song's constant background shouts and frenetic beat. This is followed by Night Vision, somehow both relaxing and sad at the same time, in which the group, even in a lush hotel room, move as if drunk or dying, as they're forced to autograph countless pieces of merch without respite. However, the final track, Too Long, whose lyrics speak of freedom of mind and spirit after a long time without, shows a segment in which the band, safe and reformed but exhausted after their harrowing experience, gradually find their groove again, their sincere and relaxed music making in a small but comfortable room gaining traction along with the song itself. I think enjoyment of this film is going to depend largely on the viewer's taste regarding not only Japanese animation and science fiction, but Daft Punk music and electronic music in general. Clocking in at 65 minutes, you'll effectively be hearing the entirety of Daft Punk's Discovery album from start to finish with no breaks in between songs, which may or may not be your cup of tea regardless of the fantastic and exciting visual story going with it. Still, I think it's always a beautiful thing when two masters of vastly different crafts come together like a classic anime mech of old to create a whole new duet for both the eye and the ear. Gather around next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you. Greetings, fair listeners, and thank you for joining me once again as we celebrate stories and storytelling in all their forms and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I am the Tale Collector and your host, Erica Lynn Adams. We've all heard stories of our favorite celebrities and artists working ordinary day jobs before achieving or to finance their creative fame. I myself have worn several occupation hats in between writing over the years. Fast food worker, ticket taker, candy seller, TV production assistant, among others. Yet, as I was researching this music project, I was amazed to learn just how many in that one industry specifically studied law. These include, but are in no way limited to, Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, creator of the much-performed ballets Swan Lake and the Nutcracker, Francis Scott Key, composer of the Star-Spangled Banner, Columbia Records producer Clive Davis, and Paul Simon of the folk rock duo Simon and Garfunkel. Now, I'll readily admit that I know as much about law as I do the meaning of life, but few professions could interest me less. Yet such an apparent juxtaposition just goes to show how employees and artists are not mutually exclusive, as is the case of half of this musical duo. Presenting Mythos, performing from 1996 to the present, and recommended for listeners 12 and up. Born September 24, 1964, in British Hong Kong, Bob Dieth grew up training as a classical and jazz pianist in West Vancouver, British Columbia, playing in several semi-professional bands until finishing high school. He later earned degrees in history and law from the University of Victoria. Joining alternative rock group Rhymes with Orange as keyboardist in 1991, he toured Canada many times before stepping back to be a co-managing non-touring member of the band, during which it received a Juno Award nomination for Best New Artist, and he himself was honored with a Best Keyboardist nomination at Canadian Music Week. During all this, he started his own private practice in real estate and entertainment law, having worked as counsel for various law firms throughout the 1990s. He also served as a member of the British Columbia Legislative Assembly for Maple Ridge Mission from May 2017 to September 2024, and as Parliamentary Secretary for Arts and Film from December 2022 to November 2024. As of writing, he practices solely as a music lawyer and is both executive director of the British Columbia Music Association, Music BC, and president of the music label and consulting company, Adagio Music. It was after Dieth's time with Rhymes with Orange and several years of urging from his father that he teamed up with his brother's best friend from high school, classically trained guitarist Paul Schmidt. The idea behind what would eventually become Mythos was to create music better suited for film and TV rather than for commercial radio, as well as showcase the duo's composing ability. Ironically, it was around this time that instrumental songs, new age and otherwise, were beginning to make their way onto radio. The duo decided to try their luck and send in one of their early EPs, November, which immediately became a hit. Their first two studio albums, Introspection and Iridescence, were released under Dieth's Spark Records label with next to no publicity outside of Canada. But after Mythos was picked up by Higher Octave Music, said albums were reworked and combined into the project's eponymous album in 1998, earning Dieth and Schmidt greater exposure and acclaim, including a number 18 spot on the Billboard Top New Age album list the following year. Incidentally, like several of my favorite New Age artists, my own exposure to Mythos was via the New Age compilation CD series Pure Moods, November being their contributed track. Though Dieth and Schmidt are the musical heart and soul of Mythos, and though their name is literally the Greek word for myth, the duo brings the world into their world music. Rather than recruit longtime members like a traditional band, they instead bring in several renowned guests for their myriad albums, from musicians like jazz singer Jennifer Scott, who's performed at jazz festivals all over Canada and the US, and virtuoso bass player Renee Wurst, who's worked with big names like David Bowie and Aerosmith, to technical artists like engineer and mixer Mark Hensley, who won a 2018 Emmy for his sound design on the Netflix series Genius. Speaking of the world, I can no longer see Mythos' cover art and not think about the 2 weeks I spent in Italy back in high school. As of 2025, the artwork of every album was done by visionary painter and sculptor Gil Bruvel. Inspired by the likes of Salvador Dali, Max Ernst, and Giorgio G. Chirico, his work to me is like Hieronymus Bosch if he was inspired by Cirque du Soleil. Each cover features the face and/or body of a woman as the centerpiece, wearing an ornate costume ball-like mask or outfit, sometimes surrounded by what I interpret as Italian puppet or jester iconography, vibrant and spirited, but also mysterious and sensual. Many such minute details hide both in front and inside the booklet so that you could spend hours scrutinizing the imagery and find something new each time. For Mythos' later albums, starting with their fifth, Journey, Breville began to shift away from the elaborate background details while making the female centerpiece more geometric and abstract with more subdued color palettes. While I do miss the old European romance of the former, I see the experimental vibe of the latter as an evolution rather than a downgrade. Even if one listens to Mythos without knowing Dieth and Schmidt's names or history, one can still get a clear sense of their camaraderie. That's not to say they don't each excel as soloists, though there are very few such pieces in their entire roster. Dieth's piano playing has a purity to it, as bold and powerful as a youth in his prime, or as sincere and meditative as an old man reflecting on his life. Schmidt's acoustic guitar reminds me a lot of flamenco, as quick and passionate as a Spanish dancer, yet it can also be as gentle and romantic as a waiting lover. A quick side note for anime fans. Am I mistaken, or is that a snippet of Schmidt's song La Cathedral, which plays about 19 minutes into episode 10 of Hellsing? But it's the duets that truly make Mythos shine. Through their masterful skills at their respective instruments, the two men together offer many unique combinations of moods and tones, making their songs all the richer and more dynamic. As mentioned earlier, though primarily instrumental, Mythos does include some vocalization. You know how most vocal songs in general place the singer in the forefront while the instrumentation backs them up? Well, Mythos does the opposite. The singers do the backing up here, to the point of becoming their own instrument alongside the strings, synth, and percussion. While not so quiet they can't be heard at all, they are often soft enough to blend right in while the piano and guitar retain center stage. For better or for worse, the same goes for the very rare few songs which do feature actual lyrics, whether due to the piano and guitar being the main attraction or the sheer vocal volume or lack thereof. If you compare, for example, Turn to Grey and Dreams of Jade, I think the latter song is stronger because of Jennifer Scott's deeper and more commanding voice, while Christine Duncan's higher and more delicate one is so faint it almost feels distracting. Almost. Activities like practicing music law or traveling to Europe can seem commonplace on the surface, yet in the right context they can lead to memorable experiences. Music from a single source that could feel equally at home in a modern cafe or a retro Sonic the Hedgehog game is equally memorable, especially when it comes from a place of friendship and creativity. This is the specialty of Mythos, two talented friends combining ordinary piano and guitar and various world styles and music professionals to produce an extraordinary array of timeless, nostalgic, and imaginative auditory art. Gather round next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you. Greetings, fair listeners, and thank you for joining me once again as we celebrate stories and storytelling in all their forms and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I am the Tale Collector and your host, Erica Lynn Adams. Warning, this story deals with mature topics like cyberbullying and teen suicide. Listener and researcher discretion is advised. Looking back, I consider myself lucky when it comes to my high school years. My parents, though busy, were as supportive as possible. I had good friends who never took advantage of me, and I was so focused on my grades that I simply couldn't be bothered to look for trouble. Now, this could be my age talking. I graduated in 2005, but whenever I hear true stories of teen bullying and or suicide, I find myself thinking, are actual teens really this stupidly cruel to each other? I mean, cheesy Nickelodeon sitcoms, melodramatic soap operas, and raunchy slasher flicks are one thing. But serious, real-life news reports? I think another factor in my relatively smooth high school career was that I didn't grow up with social media, which begs the question. Had I started school just 10 years later than I did, would I have been exposed to cyberbullying and the plethora of other dangers posed by Facebook, Instagram, and the like? Not gonna lie, the thought makes me shudder, much more than this movie does, as chilling as it already is. Prepare to get Unfriended. Released in 2014 and rated R for violent content, pervasive language, some sexuality, and drug and alcohol use, all involving teens. In 2013, high schooler Laura Barnes was recorded passing out drunk in her own waste at a wild, unsupervised party. The video was then uploaded. Unable to bear the shame which followed online and off, Laura took her own life. One evening a year later, her former best friend, Blair Lilly, is Skype chatting with her boyfriend Mitch and their friends Adam, Jess, Ken, and Val, along with an uninvited user named Billy227, whose account apparently belongs to the deceased Laura. But whoever Billy227 really is, she is no mere internet troll. Not only does she harass and threaten the increasingly hysterical teens, countering every computer move they make with uncanny technological skill, she knows all of their deepest, darkest secrets, including who shot and uploaded the video that destroyed Laura. Forced to play a lethal variation of the drinking game, Never Have I Ever, Blair and her friends find themselves helpless to stop the supernatural hacker from destroying their lives in turn, both social and mortal. Originally titled Offline and Cybernatural before its wide release, Unfriended has often been compared to the Blair Witch Project in that it too popularized a unique cinematic format, screen life, despite being neither the first nor the most commercially successful of its kind. Like the deliberately unrefined look of the found footage subgenre of Blair Witch, screen life presents a story entirely via computer screen in real time, gaining popularity with the advent of increasing internet use in the 2010s. By the way, Blair Witch, Blair Lilly? Connection? Director Levon Gabriatse's interest in this project came partly from his childhood in Soviet Georgia, during which he himself was bullied, as well as his thoughts on how the nature of bullying has changed over time. The idea, he says, that he could have grown up with the internet and been subjected to such torment 24/7, as opposed to just a relative few short times a day, is a frightening one to say the least. This being the only screen life film I've seen as of writing, Unfriended has proven to be an excellent tutorial on the subject. Some of the best horror films ever made are those in which we see less rather than more. Everything is presented entirely through Blair's MacBook screen. Unlike a regular video camera, a computer is more cumbersome to carry, has no specialized capture features, and is just plain finicky at the best of times. Glitches abound as pixels and audio can't always keep up with quick movements, obscuring transmissions while creating an uncanny atmosphere in which you start to question what you're actually seeing. Plus, it is refreshing to get that nice creepy amateur look without the headache-inducing, stomach-churning hassle of shaking cameras. As a side note, I absolutely love how the filmmakers similarly distorted the opening Universal Pictures production logo. Not as subtle as the Ring franchise's artistic VHS graininess of the DreamWorks and Paramount logos, of course. But hey, since when have teen slashers been known for subtlety? That we see almost nothing beyond the teens' faces increases the feeling of claustrophobic helplessness. This aspect ties in well with their significant, albeit obvious, social media addiction. In their desperation, they think that by staying online they are staying connected, when in reality they are just making themselves easier targets. Seriously, turning to chat roulette for help when someone's literally dying? Even by hilariously dumb movie teen standards, who does that? And where are the parents anyway? Is there really no one around in any one of the teens' houses to hear the carnage happening? Which brings me to some other contextual issues I've noticed upon subsequent viewings, several of which revolve around Blair herself. Before we even know what she looks like, she kicks off the story by watching Laura's infamous suicide video. Now I know that young spectators who record first and help later are a tragic reality, but who except the most callous and detached watches a suicide video of a best friend without so much as an emotional peep? Moreover, several times when Blair is typing private conversations, she never actively mutes her friends. Instead, they have a way of conveniently muffling themselves, apparently so Blair can concentrate on checking over her messages for several unnecessary seconds before sending, and hovering her cursor over links for several more unnecessary seconds before clicking. Also that the audience has ample time to read over her shoulder, so to speak, which is pretty much as exciting as it sounds. Yet one of the most glaring by far is when Blair, a tech-savvy millennial of the 2010s, asks her friends what an internet troll is. Moments like these are on par with, as you know, and other lazy info-dumping tropes. They may help get the audience up to speed and move the story along, but at the expense of natural story progression and world immersion. Yet there is some good meat to be found on these technological bones. I've mentioned in the past that teen slasher flicks aren't my cinematic cup of tea, due in large part to most of the potential victims having more hormones and narcissism than brain cells and empathy, and these guys are no exception. But again, the screen life format helps. The intimacy of the single location recording lets us really see their personalities, relationships, and quirks, based solely on the dialogue, actions, and possessions shown up front. Like Jess using a flat iron and other makeup items, Val shouting at her yapping dog, Ken blending salsa in his bedroom, Adam acting macho with his loaded handgun, and Blair being turned on by Mitch's kinky threats with his butcher knife. But hands down, it is Billy who steals the show without a single natural spoken word. A major production highlight is how the filmmakers, in seamless real time, incorporate faults and errors that in fully functioning devices shouldn't be possible. Billy's mechanical flexes alone run the group ragged, from making hang-up or close options disappear to imitating a very creepy 911 dispatcher. Her wicked sense of humor truly shines once the drinking-turned-dying game begins. Bit by bit, she strips each teen naked, exposing the cruelties the so-called friends have committed against each other behind their backs. Sort of like the best, or worst, reality TV, one can't help but keep watching the relentless onslaught of cold, harsh truth, just so one can squirm with depraved delight at the participants' priceless, heated reactions. Even better, I can almost see Billy savoring her sweet, sweet revenge via the specific ways she targets the teens and rubs their tragedy and heartbreak in their faces. Notable examples include showing a fake adult entertainment pop-up ad featuring a prior recording of Blair teasingly unbuttoning her shirt, over a backdrop of the real Blair and her remaining friends distraught weeping at the sudden death of one of their number, and playing the Connie Conway song My How You Lie 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 on full blast with Blair unable to mute it, while the other teens bicker and curse at each other for their exposed betrayals, all in a brilliant display of deceptively cheerful juxtaposition. And yet, through it all, they each deny responsibility or make excuses to justify their heinous actions. And considering the chameleonic ease with which they lie and cheat and backstab each other for their own pleasure or gain, I think in this case at least, we can only place so much blame on social media. In any other movie, these kids would be the heroes, flaws notwithstanding. Blair, I dare say, is set up to be the quintessential final girl. But they're also just as dumb and conceited as any slasher victim of old, just as likely to go off in search of their next and/or final drunken orgy in the woods. That said, Unfriended's confined setup not only necessitates and executes more creativity regarding character interactions as well as kills, it provides obvious but still significant commentary on young people's abuse of each other via the internet. Instead of the attractive youths being hindered by a lack of technology with which to call for help, here it's the abundance and over-reliance on it which proves fatal. Seriously, everyone, think twice before you start slandering online, lest the consequences bleed into your reality. Literally. Gather around next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you. Greetings, fair listeners, and thank you for joining me once again as we celebrate stories and storytelling in all their forms and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I am the Tale Collector and your host, Erica Lynn Adams. The inner sanctum of the domestic sphere as practiced by the people of Victorian-era Britain was not unlike a cliched fairy tale come to life. The woman would do very little other than occupy herself with domestic duties like housekeeping and child-rearing, and often looking very attractive while doing it, as she waited diligently to be claimed as the reward by the man once he came home from, quote-unquote, saving the day, doing all the hard work and making all the fortune outside the home. Stereotypical though this may sound to our modern sensibilities, this setup nevertheless had the good intention of providing a sanctuary from the dangers and hardships of the outer world. Not only a literal one, but a mental and emotional one as well. But as we have long since learned over the centuries, even our own personal Edens can and do hide their fair share of serpents. Few novels exemplify this quite like Mary Elizabeth Braddon's Lady Audley's Secret, first published in 1862 and recommended for readers 17 and up. Robert Audley, a somewhat lazy, non-practicing barrister, receives a delightful surprise when he unexpectedly runs into his best friend, George Talboys. George has just returned to England after a 3-year gold-digging expedition in Australia and is anxious to return to Helen and Georgie, the wife and infant son he had left behind. But his homecoming turns tragic when he learns that Helen had died the week prior, and his son, now a young boy, sees his own father as a stranger. Wanting to lift the spirits of his devastated comrade, the sympathetic Robert invites George to accompany him on a visit to Audley Court to call upon his newly married uncle, Sir Michael Audley, and cousin Alicia. Robert is especially eager to meet his new aunt, the gentle and lovely Lady Audley, only for the two friends to just keep missing her. One stormy night, George gazes upon the lady's portrait as if he has seen a ghost, before promptly disappearing himself the next day. Sensing foul play, Robert takes it upon himself to search for his friend by seeking out the true history and identity of Lady Audley, and facing the demon he discovers lurking behind her angelic mask. Sensation fiction, at its peak popularity in the 1860s and 70s, is defined as fiction in which shocking material is used to explore contemporary social anxieties. But Lady Audley's Secret, both the book and its author, raised eyebrows for more than just cheap shock value. In a most ironic and even hypocritical case of life imitating art, Braddon herself was involved in bigamy, just like her characters in the very plot she was still writing and selling. She first partly serialized the book in 1861 in John Maxwell's Robin Goodfellow magazine. Not only would Braddon have an affair with Maxwell, who was already both a husband and father, but would go on to marry him upon his first wife's death and bear her own children with him. Despite the ensuing scandal, or maybe because of it, Lady Audley's Secret would be Braddon's most successful and best-known work, and one of, if not the finest, in the sensation genre. Compared to overtly supernatural contemporaries like Bram Stoker's Dracula or Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I think sensation stories made polite society more nervous back then for the same reason certain slasher or psychological horror films like Halloween or Saw make some modern audiences more nervous today. They are not outside the realm of reality or possibility. Though the eponymous character is painted as a fairy tale princess incarnate, it's a portrait more ignorant and immature than elegant and dignified. While Braddon's repetition of the word childish gets old fast, it's fitting nonetheless. And not just because Lady Audley happens to be at least 30 years Sir Michael's junior. The way she seldom seems to read the room, so to speak, acting so blithe when the present atmosphere is so solemn and grim, feels inappropriate to the point of callousness. Even the usually easygoing Robert is quick to notice this, his own eye for her beauty notwithstanding. Pages 120 to 121 of the 2003 Broadview edition. "He's a very good fellow," Robert said stoutly, "and to tell the honest truth, I'm rather uneasy about him." "Uneasy about him?" My lady was quite anxious to know why Robert was uneasy about his friend. "I'll tell you why, Lady Audley," answered the young barrister. "George had a bitter blow a year ago in the death of his wife. He has never got over that trouble. He takes life pretty quietly, almost as quietly as I do, but he often talks very strangely, and I sometimes think that one day this grief will get the better of him, and he will do something rash." Mr. Robert Audley spoke vaguely, but all three of his listeners knew that the something rash to which he alluded was that one deed for which there was no repentance. There was a brief pause, during which Lady Audley arranged her yellow ringlets by the aid of the glass over the console table opposite to her. "Dear me," she said, "this is very strange. I did not think men were capable of these deep and lasting affections. I thought that one pretty face was as good as another pretty face to them, and that when number one with blue eyes and fair hair died, they had only to look for number two with dark eyes and black hair, by way of variety. George Talboys is not one of those men. I firmly believe that his wife's death broke his heart." "How sad," murmured Lady Audley. "It seems almost cruel of Mrs. Talboys to die and grieve her poor husband so much." "Alicia was right. She is childish," thought Robert as he looked at his aunt's pretty face. My lady was very charming at the dinner table. She professed the most bewitching incapacity for carving the pheasant set before her, and called Robert to her assistance. "I could carve a leg of mutton at Mr. Dawson's," she said, laughing. "But a leg of mutton is so easy, and then I used to stand up." Sir Michael watched the impression my lady made upon his nephew with a proud delight in her beauty and fascination. "I am so glad to see my poor little woman in her usual good spirits once more," he said. "She was very downhearted yesterday at a disappointment she met with in London." "A disappointment?" "Yes, Mr. Audley, a very cruel one," answered my lady. "I received the other morning a telegraphic message from my dear old friend and school mistress telling me that she was dying, and that if I wanted to see her again, I must hasten to her immediately. The telegraphic dispatch contained no address. "It was very foolish not to send the address in the telegraphic message," said Robert. "When people are dying, it is not so easy to think of all these things," murmured my lady, looking reproachfully at Mr. Audley with her soft blue eyes. In spite of Lady Audley's fascination, and in spite of Robert's very unqualified admiration of her, the barrister could not overcome a vague feeling of uneasiness on this quiet September evening. The negative socioeconomic impact of the Industrial Revolution also influenced sensation tales, in that there became fewer smaller rural communities in which people knew each other intimately, as well as a significant shrinkage of social and personal gaps between the upper and lower classes. Phoebe, because of her status as Lady Audley's maid, is never considered attractive despite her physical resemblance to her. But she is taken into the lady's confidence as more of a close companion, giving her a sense of superiority even while she self-righteously declares her humble loyalty. This too rocked Victorian readers as it showed them just how easily a quiet but watchful servant could access their rich employer's secrets while hiding their own. Pages 69 to 70. "I wish I could show you the jewels, Luke," said the girl, "but I can't, for she always keeps the keys herself. That's the case on the dressing table there." "What, that?" cried Luke, staring at the massive walnut wood and brass inlaid casket. "Why, that's big enough to hold every bit of clothes I've got." "And it's as full as it can be of diamonds, rubies, pearls, and emeralds," answered Phoebe, busy as she spoke in folding the rustling silk dresses and laying them one by one upon the shelves of the wardrobe. As she was shaking out the flounces of the last, a jingling sound caught her ear, and she put her hand into the pocket. "I declare," she exclaimed, "my lady has left her keys in her pocket for once in a way. I can show you the jewelry if you like, Luke." "Well, I may as well have a look at it, my girl," he said, rising from his chair and holding the light while his cousin unlocked the casket. He uttered a cry of wonder when he saw the ornaments glittering on white satin cushions. He wanted to handle the delicate jewels, to pull them about and find out their mercantile value. Perhaps a pang of longing and envy shot through his heart as he thought of how he would have liked to have taken one of them. "Why, one of these diamond things would set us up in life, Phoebe," he said, turning a bracelet over and over in his big red hands. "Put it down, Luke! Put it down directly!" cried the girl with a look of terror. "How can you speak about such things?" He laid the bracelet in its place with a reluctant sigh, and then continued his examination of the casket. "What's this?" he asked presently, pointing to a brass knob in the framework of the box. He pushed it as he spoke, and a secret drawer, lined with purple velvet, flew out of the casket. "Looky here," cried Luke, pleased at his discovery. Phoebe Marks threw down the dress she had been folding and went over to the toilet table. "Why, I never saw this before," she said. "I wonder what there is in it." There was not much in it, neither gold nor gems, only a baby's little worsted shoe rolled up in a piece of paper, and a tiny lock of pale and silky yellow hair, evidently taken from a baby's head. Phoebe's eyes dilated as she examined the little packet. "So this is what my lady hides in the secret drawer," she muttered. "It's queer rubbish to keep in such a place," said Luke carelessly. The girl's thin lips curved into a curious smile. "You will bear me witness where I found this," she said, putting the little parcel into her pocket. "Why, Phoebe, you're not going to be such a fool as to take that," cried the young man. "I'd rather have this than the diamond bracelet you would have liked to take," she answered. "You shall have the public house, Luke." But perhaps the saddest aspect of this story is that no one cares enough to take time to understand the people close to them, resulting in more than just criminals and blackmailers carrying out their misdeeds under oblivious noses. Alicia, for instance, is disgusted by her stepmother's frivolous immaturity, not to mention the sight of grown men falling for it. Thus, she never suspects that her cousin's increasingly serious interest in Lady Audley is anything more than typical idiotic male fawning, further eroding their already brittle relationship. This lack of personal appreciation extends even to Robert, who surprises himself when he puts his skills as a barrister to good use for once in tracking George and those who had contact with him. Unfortunate that Robert's transformation into a more dedicated and responsible man has had to come at the expense of his dearest friend. Pages 133 to 135. Very late in the evening he rose from his chair, pushed away the table, wheeled his desk over to the fireplace, took out a sheet of foolscap, and dipped a pen in the ink. But after doing this he paused, leaned his forehead upon his hand, and once more relapsed into thought. I shall draw up a record of all that has occurred between our going down to Essex and tonight, beginning at the very beginning." He drew up this record in short detached sentences, which he numbered as he wrote. It ran thus: Journal of facts connected with the disappearance of George Talboys, inclusive of facts which have no apparent relation to that circumstance. In spite of the troubled state of his mind, he was rather inclined to be proud of the official appearance of this heading. He sat for some time looking at it with affection, and with the feather of his pen in his mouth. "Upon my word," he said, "I begin to think that I ought to have pursued my profession instead of dawdling my life away as I have done." When Robert Audley had completed this brief record, which he drew up with great deliberation, and with frequent pauses for reflection, alterations, and erasures, he sat for a long time contemplating the written page. Skipping to page 183, he rested his elbows on his knees and buried his face in his hands. The one purpose which had slowly grown up in his careless nature until it had become powerful enough to work a change in that very nature made him what he had never been before, a Christian, conscious of his own weakness, anxious to keep to the strict line of duty, fearful to swerve from the conscientious discharge of the strange task that had been forced upon him, and reliant on a stronger hand than his own to point the way which he was to go. Perhaps he uttered his first earnest prayer that night, seated by his lonely fireside, thinking of George Talboys. When he raised his head from that long and silent reverie, his eyes had a bright, determined glance, and every feature in his face seemed to wear a new expression. "Justice to the dead first," he said. "Mercy to the living afterward." He wheeled his easy-chair to the table, trimmed the lamp, and settled himself to the examination of the books. While in some ways this novel hasn't aged well, particularly with regards to women, at its core it remains surprisingly significant. No longer is the role of villain delegated solely to the physically unattractive, the less refined lower class, or the explicitly non-human. Combining the gorgeous Gothic atmosphere of a classic monster story of old with a tense psychological mystery for the ages, Lady Audley's Secret highlights the dangers of accepting charm and charisma at face value, and the regrets of taking loved ones for granted. A powerful reminder to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Gather round next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you. Greetings, fair listeners, and thank you for joining me once again as we celebrate stories and storytelling in all their forms and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I am the Tale Collector and your host, Erica Lynn Adams. All was darkness. All was silence. My family was away for the night. No work awaited me in the morning. Thus, all was also contentment. Not ready for bed just yet, I was wandering through the vast halls of Netflix when I came across an anime that seemed unusual for reasons that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I decided to spare one more half hour and watch the first episode. As cliched as it sounds, the next 24 minutes really did pass like a dream. The sensation stayed with me long after the credits finished rolling. I didn't begin the second episode right then and there. I simply turned off my TV and laid on my couch for what I thought was just a few more minutes, never wanting this feeling to leave me. The ending theme flowed like a starry river through my mind's ears, until my stepfather's heirloom clock chimed midnight and sleep at last beckoned me. And what a beautiful, peaceful sleep it was. I give you Mushishi, first published from 1999 to 2002, and then airing from 2005 to 2006, and recommended for audiences 16 and up. They are known as Mushi. They have existed since time immemorial in a myriad of forms, from plants and animals to weather phenomena to shapes unnameable. They exist on a plane where the corporeal can never tread, more primitive than bacteria, and yet as powerful as gods. Some worship them as bringers of miracles, while others fear them as bringers of madness. Humans who make their living studying them are called Mushishi, or Mushi masters, one of whom is a lone young man named Ginkgo. With his striking silver hair and single piercing emerald eye, he is as much a mystery as the Mushi he researches. In strict, lifelong devotion to his work, Ginkgo wanders the countryside, aiding those he finds afflicted by the Mushi, and ever teaching them and himself about these otherworldly organisms along the way. The initial concept of Mushishi was inspired by author and manga artist Yuki Urushibara's childhood love of insects and grade school science. This makes sense considering that the Japanese word mushi primarily means insect or bug. The idea was later shaped by her pragmatic approach to belief, or lack thereof, in the supernatural, as she states in Volume 1, quote, "I absolutely do not believe nowadays in ghosts or fairy tale creatures, but I wish they did exist. Mushi were born as a part of that dilemma, and so they take on the form of monsters at times. But only a little while back, monsters lived very close to people. I'm kind of envious of that." Unquote. For his part, upon reading the manga, anime director Hiroshi Nagahama was impressed by its emphasis on how we often miss smaller, seemingly insignificant things the first time around, and how personal and life-changing rediscovering them can be. According to an interview statement from the complete series DVD, quote, "Just by glancing at the cover of the manga, I couldn't tell what this book was about, so that made the shock I got when I read it bigger. It's not something that deals with good or evil, or portrays only happy endings, or focuses only on characters or emphasizes story settings too much. The Mushishi manga is something that's really close to the feeling of meeting and talking with people. Like this, you'll discover new things. So if you read it at different times in your life, you'll be surprised to find things that you missed before. This is a manga that makes you notice many things that you overlooked before." Unquote. To be honest, I don't think the monochrome comic style of manga does Urushibara's story justice. Nagahama uses all the powers of visual media to bring her series to life in every sense of the word. Ginkgo's travels take him through lush green forests, towering mountains covered in autumn leaves and immaculate snow, and picturesque cobalt oceans, all painted in gorgeous watercolors and filled with the natural sounds which stir the heart and calm the spirit. Speaking of sound, composer Toshio Masuda did for Mushishi what Austin Wintory did for that game company's 2012 indie adventure video game, Journey. The show's soundtrack is an exquisite blend of gentle piano, synth and percussion, and mystical chimes, bells, and wind instruments. Each episode has its own end credits theme unique to its own individual story, ranging in tone from hopeful, meditative, and wondrous to disquieting, cryptic, and melancholy. Combined with enigmatic vignette titles reminiscent of nature poetry, such as The Pillow Pathway, Those Who Inhale the Dew, Where Sea Meets Man, The Sleeping Mountain, A Sea of Writings, and The Sound of Footsteps on the Grass, these tracks provide a zen-like experience for any listener. This is why this series feels so down-to-earth despite its supernatural elements. Another reason is its anthological format. In each of these vignettes, Ginkgo encounters a new set of characters and a new Mushi to contend with, resolves the issue at hand, then leaves without ever seeing them again. The anime is so faithful to the manga that literally the only difference between the two is the order in which these vignettes occur. To borrow a sentiment from Tolkien, you can wander through any story and never feel truly lost. Such a format is a wonderful way to illustrate how life, not unlike Ginkgo and the Mushi, has no beginning or end. It simply flows, and everything just flows with it. That said, I would personally recommend starting with the very first story, The Green Gathering from the manga, or The Green Seat from the anime. This is where Ginkgo provides an ambiguous yet beautifully profound explanation of the mystery that is the Mushi, representing familiar flora and fauna with parts of the hand and arm, away from the heart, and the Mushi with the heart, the last being so close to the source of all life as to be life itself. But what else is it that makes Mushi so strange, and so dangerous? What separates them from ordinary parasites is their unfathomable abilities. Examples include consuming sound or silence as food, literally bringing a host's dreams into the waking world, dissolving other life forms into water, and living in a host's eyeballs and granting prophetic sight. And then there's Ginkgo himself. As if his pale complexion isn't enough to make him stick out, there's his 20th century attire. Button shirt, slacks, trench coat, etc., in what is supposed to be a fictionalized 19th century Japan. Urushibara had originally wanted to set Mushishi in modern times and designed him accordingly. Even after changing the era, she kept his design, partly as a subtle nod to his more worldly knowledge. In fact, Ginkgo has no choice in his occupation as a Mushi master, as he is a rare individual who attracts Mushi wherever he goes. Hence why he can't stay in one place too long, and why he constantly smokes a special tobacco to repel them. But he is neither a tragic hero nor a semi-divine being. Others, whether they understand it or not, can see Mushi or at least sense them just as well as he. And like any human, Ginkgo can be sarcastic, crack jokes, and get grumpy, but thankfully minus the crossvein, sweat drop, or other over-the-top anime emotion symbols that would clash with the story's solemn aesthetic. Nevertheless, his interest in all things Mushi and his satisfaction in helping affected people are genuine. Equal parts scholar, physician, biologist, and counselor, Ginkgo's teachings regarding the Mushi are freely given with a fatherly patience and dignity. That's not to say all Ginkgo's cases are straightforward or have nice, neat endings. Whether due to his own inexperience or to foolish civilians and arrogant fellow Mushi masters wanting to abuse Mushi's power, adore them with dangerous obsession, or take reckless vengeance on them, things that his principles as both a Mushi master and human being would never allow, there are times when people won't heed his advice, with dire consequences. Still, all Ginkgo can do is move on and try again. While his priority is the humans in his care, it is rarely with pleasure that he will kill Mushi. The one rule that he lives by is no matter how ghostly or frightening or bizarre, they are as much a part of nature as any life form, and as such, are just as deserving of existence. Mushishi may not seem impressive at first glance to the typical hardcore manga and anime fan. There are no epic battles, exaggerated character designs, alien landscapes, or excessive fan service. Here instead is magical realism at its most honest, as much a fictional nature documentary as a supernatural mystery, with a protagonist and side characters each as authentic and relatable as its eponymous creatures are each fascinating and unique. Mushishi is a rare piece of Japanese fiction that quietly invites us to look at the natural world with awe and wonder, and contemplate our woeful ignorance and ever-fragile relationship with it. Best experienced at night, one story at a time, without rushing, just as real life intended. Gather round next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you.